Hello, and welcome to another video. It's been a while, but today we're going to be discussing a more theoretical concept in League, which is how people can carry and what kind of forms carrying can really take, right? So there are kind of two main ways people carry, right? There are the people who will carry through a impact, pressure, and those kinds of things way, I suppose. And there are people who will carry through gold, stats, damage, whatever, right? So if we really think about this, let's take a bot laner's perspective because it is the role I currently mostly play, right? If you're an ADC, right, you can either play for 10 CS a minute, you can try to get all of your items, you can try to get kills, and then you're probably going to need, I don't know, let's say 15 kills, 10 CS a minute, you're going to have like 3-4 items, you're going to be able to 3-4 hit the enemy team, and okay, we're going to carry by killing everyone in a fight, right? Okay, and to many people, this is going to be the main form of carrying in the game. This is what many people will envision when they hear carrying, right? But what about if someone, say you're a jungler, starts bot side, and the jungler starts top side. Say that you managed to survive this laning phase while going even, or maybe even ahead, right? And you never died. Never died to the enemy jungler. The enemy jungler wastes time on you anyway, and you're just chilling, right? In this case, now the top laner has, I don't know, let's say 2 or 3 kills. He has like pretty good CS. He's ahead, right? Maybe your jungler and top laner dove the enemy top laner, and you can say, okay, well, who really carried this game, right? The top laner is probably going to have more impact than you in terms of damage, stats, like presence in a fight, and so on. But is he actually the carry? To me, in this scenario, the carry is you, because you actually managed to make more of a bad situation. Likewise, I would always see people who would have a pretty high impact while having next to no gold, and compare them to people who had a shit ton of gold but had like a good impact, right? So let's say that you have 20k gold, right? And you had 40k damage. Then there is someone who has 10k gold, but he has 30k damage, right? Obviously, damage is not the best stat, it's very skewed. For example, if you play Xerath, your damage is going to be inflated. If you play something like, I don't know, some all-in champion, which can only do that, right? Like, only hits the enemy when they're going for a kill, then your damage is obviously going to be deflated, right? So, and then there are champions who have a pretty normalized amount of damage based on gold. But in a general sense, we can compare this and we can say that in this scenario, you might say, well, this guy carried. He had most gold, he had most damage, and so on, right? But this guy had an insane impact. He had no resources, and yet he had so much impact, which is pretty crazy to me. I've always aspired to be able to have like this kind of an impact where when I'm not giving resources, when I'm not in a good position or whatever, I can still have a big say in what happens in the game, right? Because always being in this position is quite difficult, and it requires your teammates to set you up in some way, or it requires you to outplay the enemy in a major way in the earlier parts of the game, while also playing in a specific manner. Okay, so now that we got that out of the way, right? What does this really mean for us? Well, there are two things that we can really take away from this. Firstly, if we are a player who is looking to utilize different ways of carrying, then we need to be able to obviously play multiple styles, right? Which means we need to be a better player. By styles, I mean one style is going to be, okay, well, enemy jungler should top side, my jungler should bot side, so I'm weak side on bot lane. So that means I am now going to respect every gank, and I'm not really gonna do anything, right? This is what you would say, what you would do and say if you were a pretty weak champion in the early game who can't really do that much, right? I don't really prefer to play these champions, but say that you were something like a Zeri, you don't really get to 2v3 or whatever else, right? Or bully the lane or whatever in a major way. I prefer champions like Ezreal or whatever who can do the things I just mentioned, which is 2v3 or bully the lane in a major way or whatever. And in that scenario, you might be able to play up anyway, even though the jungler is here. In which case, you are going to either, one, whenever the jungler actually goes for a gank or whatever, you're going to back off because you want to waste their time, right? But you're not going to back off until they're actually committed to the gank, so they actually lose time. Because many people will make this mistake where they think, oh, well, the enemy jungler is here. Okay, time to back off, time to do nothing. Well, okay, well, as a jungler, I will just recall then and go topside and play there. So I didn't really achieve that much. I survived, but I didn't really impact the game in a major way. Similarly, they might just like ward, and the moment that the jungler shows them the ward, they might just like back off. It's better than the previous scenario, but not by much. The best thing you can really do usually in a scenario where you have to back off is to make sure that the enemy jungler comes as close as possible. So maybe like this, and then maybe you stand like this, right? And you're kind of like showing, maybe I kind of have an idea, maybe I kind of don't, you know? And if you can do this really well, you can oftentimes even get them to sit in a bush for, say, a minute or something. And if you get the enemy jungler to sit in a bush for a minute, like that's basically game winning for your team. They might not utilize it, but it is game winning for them. Like, if I'm your jungler and you get the enemy jungler to sit in this bush for a minute, I'm going to win the game like 90% of the time on the champions I actually play. Alright. And then what if I can't fight, right? Then I can just fist fight it, right? But then when you fist fight it, you'll notice that many times what ends up happening is maybe you don't go that ahead, right? Maybe you don't get a triple kill. Maybe you don't even get 2 kills. Maybe you go like 1 for 1. Maybe you go like 2 for 2, but your support gets like the kills. Or maybe he gets 1 kill and you get 1 kill. Whatever else, right? Maybe your CS is quite lacking later on, or whatever. Maybe you have like 30 CS at, I don't know, 8 minutes, and then maybe you have like 50 CS or 60 CS at 10 minutes, right? Meanwhile, the top side has like 90 CS or 100. And suddenly you feel like you're kind of lacking on the resource department. Well, this is the idea and the philosophy behind different ways of carrying, right? You drew the jungler to be in your lane, you fist fought, and you fucked the enemies over, right? Like enemy ADC or enemy jungler or someone is going to fall behind from this. Like if the jungler is getting kills, then the enemy ADC is falling behind from this, and he should be in a pretty bad spot, especially considering that he's the strong-sided one and his top side should be losing. Similarly, if the enemy ADC is the one getting the kills, the enemy jungler should be really messed up, and that should really mess up the top side, right? The same concept really applies to every role, though it's a bit difficult to really explain in the context of jungle. How would I really explain jungle? In jungle, I suppose you could say that this would be like playing for the team or playing for yourself, I suppose, where you would be like ganking, counter ganking, like pressure ganking, whatever, right? Those types of things, and I suppose those things would be pretty similar. I haven't made a video in a while, so I've been kind of saying a lot, but it's fine. We can... Sorry. We can work with this, it's fine, it's fine. So then later on, as the game progresses, right, you also have the option of having this kind of stuff happen. So in a fight, the typical way to really look at a fight, right? So let's just put the bot laners into mid lane, and let's just move the mid laners to the side. Something like this, and okay. So when you're looking at something like this, you're thinking, okay, so the frontliners, so that's probably going to be the support or the jungler or the top laner, like someone, right? Someone is going to be frontlining, and then the ADC may be backlines, maybe you play front to back or something, right? That can be the option, yes, that can be the case, that can be the way to play. You can also, though, as an ADC, play up, right? Same thing for the other roles. You might just play outside of what is expected of your role. So, say an ADC who is really fed can play pretty up. It's going to be risky, but it's also going to be rewarding. Likewise, an ADC who's really underfed, right? might decide to play the defensive style because they're thinking, well, I have no items and I want to play defensive because I don't really know what I want to do with this. Okay, I see where you're coming from. You can't really insta-kill the enemy. You're not really going to 1v9 completely, right? And whatever else. Okay, that's a pretty fine evaluation, I suppose. At the same time, though, if I do that and I don't have many resources, how high is my impact realistically? Not that high, right? Realistically, the more on the edge, let's say, I'm playing on any role, the more impact I'm gonna have. So the key really, in that case, to become the best player you can, is to play as on the edge as possible. So knowing your limits and whatever else, right? This ends up shining through even more when you're actually underfed, because as an underfed, say, ADC or something, right? People still want to kill you because you're actually even easier to kill than usual. You might not deal that much damage and whatever, so it's not that important to kill you as it is if you're like 20-0, right? But it's still a DPS role. It's still going to be the role that's likely going to decide who's going to end up winning the fight in the end, because if the ADC lives too long, the people are probably going to die unless he's not hitting anything. This is where we come to a little dilemma, let's say. Do I now want to play defensive or do I want to play more aggressive? And this is what we call playstyles. But while you might call them playstyles, right, they're also kind of crutches. People are going to lean towards either playing more defensive or more aggressive, and that's fine. You might say, there is no aggressive and defensive, there is only correct and incorrect. That's true, yes. There is a play in every scenario that should be optimal. But people leaning towards a defensive or an aggressive approach, or it doesn't really have to be that, it can also be like something else. Maybe a utility approach, maybe whatever else, right? Just leaning towards an approach or a playstyle can be helpful for a player to simplify the game for them a lot. And this is where we find the, let's say, 80-20 rule, which people love to use. So you're really going to only have to put in a bit of effort to use a playstyle or an approach and find success, while you're going to have to put a lot of effort in to really find the ideal play in every scenario. That's why those things can be really impressive. But most people, or well, I would say pretty much no one is really able to do that. Everyone has some kind of approach or playstyle or whatever else that they lean back on, even the best of the best. So when we look at this, right, our takeaway here is that as a player, we can really choose many ways to carry, and you don't have to always lean into one. At the same time, though, a death or something similar is not always going to be the same, right? A death, a kill, a wave, whatever, right? It's not always the same. You might think, well, if I have 10 deaths, that's bad, right? Okay, 10 deaths is probably going to be too much. If I have 5 deaths, that's bad, right? Well, you're gonna see and you're gonna say, okay, this guy has an average KDA of 8.3. This guy has an average KDA of 8.5. Obviously, this guy's a better player, right? Well, what if I told you that this guy's 3 deaths are 1, when he loses like 3 waves under a tower here. 2, I don't know, when your team is losing like 3rd dragon for it because he got caught. And 3, in like late game, I don't know, right before Baron. Those 3 deaths are horrible. Okay, what if I tell you that this guy, who dies 5 times, okay, let's list his stats now. So first death, he dies here, but he goes like, I don't know, 1 for 1 or something, right? Okay, not really a problem. Maybe the jungler was also on this side of the map, so he goes 1 for 1 on weak side. That's pretty good. You don't really mind being dead when you're on weak side, because if you're dead on weak side, but you got your wave, right? You're not actually losing waves, then you're kind of chilling, because your team is getting to play top side, and the enemy team is not really getting to play bot side. So that's pretty good. Okay, the second death that he has is maybe he goes pretty deep on the dragon fight. He baits the enemy, say, I don't know, Riven to like flash combo him. He flashes it, whatever, right? But then maybe the enemy, like assassin jungler and like mage mid laner or something, decide to also flash on him or something, right? So 3 people flash on him, they kill him, but now suddenly the whole enemy team ends up dying, and it's like 5 people for 2, right? So second death. Both of these deaths, fine. Not really an issue, right? Like, these deaths are not really an issue. And so on, right? If we go with the same pattern. So you end up seeing that at some point, these cookie cutter concepts people came up with for League, where, yeah, playstyles are bad, and you should not die, and you should do this, and you should do that, right? These things end up not really holding up in practice if you try to actually understand the game fully. At the same time, also this whole CS craving, right? It can even be negative, the CS craving. So, for example, what I mean by CS craving is, okay, you need to have 90 CS at 10 minutes. You need to have 180 at 20 minutes. You need to have, I don't know, 300 at 30 minutes, and so on, right? It's great if you do, but the problem is, are you getting this without actually having to change up your gameplay too much? Because if you're having to change up your gameplay too much, and here I don't mean changing up your bad gameplay, I mean changing up the stuff that you actually do that impacts the game, right? Like maybe you help your jungler like do something, maybe you help your teammates do something, maybe you're like baiting something, whatever, right? Like the good things that you do in your gameplay. If you have to change those to meet those markers, that ends up becoming a pretty questionable decision, right? So these ideas that people have had for a long time, right? These cookie cutter answers to how you should play the game end up becoming pretty underwhelming at best, right? Not dying, making sure you CS and so on are obviously going to always be good tips. They're going to be good advice if you're asking for very general advice, very generic. It's great, but understanding the game at a core level is going to always be better. Because something like, let's say that the mid laners are like this, right? And then whatever, right? I don't know, like whatever, right? And we don't see anyone of the enemy, so let's just like put them away. Except the enemy mid laner or something, right? Then the enemy ADC support show up here, right? They push out these waves, then they disappear. In this case, it's going to be pretty important for you to be able to read the map, right? You need to read the map that most likely what's going to happen is these two are seeing that this is the only place really to make a play on the map. They're likely going to be moving here. As they're seeing this, their jungler is probably seeing this as well, and moving here as well. So suddenly you're instantly going to have at least 4 people in the bottom lane. Maybe the enemy top laner shows up here and then TPs, or maybe he shows up here as well. So in this scenario, you might catch the wave or whatever, right? But you might also sometimes sacrifice the wave and go hover them. Maybe as ADC you're going to prefer to catch the wave, but as you're playing solo queue, you can't really rely on your support and jungler and mid laner to really play this well, right? They could just get killed as well. So this is one way to have impact as well. And really what I've been trying to illustrate here is that there are many ways to have impact in this game, and there are many hidden little, let's say, tricks and little edges you can scrape out, right? At the same time though, these ideas that have long stood are not always going to be optimal. So if you really want to improve at this game as much as possible, then you're going to need to try to understand it on a core level. I guess I'll finish this off with a little, let's say, story. I was playing top lane for like a little bit, right? And I would just pick like Jace for fun, right? And I was playing with my friend, and he was perma playing like strong side bot lane. Okay, that's chill, no problem. And he was really not happy that I would die, say like, I don't know, 5 to 10 times a game, right? But then I would look at my deaths in those games, right? And the deaths would kind of be like, okay, I was next to my tower, and the enemy Alistar, this is by the way a true story, the enemy Alistar hex flashed over this wall when I don't even have vision of him, Q'd and then W'd me into the enemy top laner, who then CC'd me because I think it was Xante or something. And then the enemy Elise came from Fog of War as well and cocooned me. Well, I died, of course, yes. Then, on the next death, the enemy jungler decides to gank me on the pushing wave, which I crash. And okay, sure, I crashed my wave. I died. Okay, whatever happens. On the death where Alistar came top lane and the jungler, my jungler and my support were playing for bot lane, so they got kills in bot lane. That's fine, a fine trade, right? Similarly, on the next death, where the enemy jungler ganked me in top lane, they again got stuff in bot lane. Then, the next time, the enemy jungler decided to herald my lane after diving me. Okay, and my team got the bot lane tower, I think. Then they got my tower, and the enemy top lane was always staying. I try to fight him. Okay, the enemy Elise sits here while the dragon is up, and my team gets the dragon, and I die. Okay, so that's like 4 or 5 deaths already, right? Where, okay, I died. I could also avoid dying, probably, but in most of these cases, I would end up losing more by avoiding the death than I would by not avoiding it, right? Like, for example, when pushing out, if I don't push out my wave and I get frozen on, I'm likely going to lose more than if I just die, right? Like, it's just the case, right? At the same time, if something makes too much sense for the enemy, right? Like, they can contest the dragon and so on, and they need to contest it because they have champs like Elise and whatever against a better scaling comp, then I'm going to say, well, surely they will go dragon. They don't go dragon? Okay, that's fine, we get the dragon. And the same trend really continued throughout the game. Later on, I go for this tower, I'm getting this tower, my team is getting Baron, enemy team plays to kill me. Okay, that's fine, right? And you can sometimes see these discrepancies between your own, say, stats and performance, right? When I have a game like that, I don't really feel like I played bad, and you shouldn't either, because it's really fine. Maybe you could have played better. You can look at your replay, of course, and you can say, okay, well, did I really need to die here? And in some of those cases, I would say no, right? Like, for example, the death to like Alistar and Elise, could probably avoid that, right? If I paid attention to enemy support. I just didn't, so that's my mistake, obviously. But I'm trying to say that even if you didn't play optimal, right, and you might have died, it doesn't always mean that you played bad, or that what you did is not worth it. If you make sure that every death, kill, and so on are worth something for your team, and they're not horrible in nature, then you're obviously going to find that your impact on the game is always going to end up being positive in some way. Anyway, though, this is what I wanted to talk about today. Sorry if the video was a bit harder to follow today, or a bit more rambly. I haven't made one in a while, so kind of rusty, let's say. But maybe I'll make another one in the near future. Anyway, if this helped you in any way, you can, I don't know, like and comment how it helped you, I don't know. And if you want to see more, then subscribe. And I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.